Several months back, I was on my usual gig as a forest ranger in Olympic National Park, Washington. I'm all about that wilderness life, and I know the area like the back of my hand. If anything unusual goes down, I'm bound to catch it. My regular routine in the park goes like this. Start with some oatmeal and coffee, then head out for park patrol. It feels more like fun than a job, you know? Over my 15 years on the job, I have seen all sorts of critters, but what I came across that day was something else entirely. So there I was, minding my own business, keeping an eye on this troublesome pack of coyotes in the forest. They weren't locals, causing a ruckus. My task? Keep them from causing too much trouble for us humans. I had to follow this used logging path, marked with fresh paw prints and the remnants of a couple of rabbit meals. Just the usual stuff, really. Initially, everything seemed normal, but as I ventured deeper, things took a strange turn. The usual lively critters were nowhere to be seen. Dead silence filled the air, not a bird chirping or squirrel scuttling about. Even the leaves ceased their rustling. It felt off. Some might chalk it up to a slow day, but I swear something felt wrong. When you've spent enough time in the woods, you develop a sixth sense about these things. The further I ventured, the heavier the air felt, as if an elephant were sitting on my chest. Then I caught a whiff of something foul. There was this incredibly strange stench, almost like something out of a horror flick. I've encountered my fair share of odors in the wilderness, but this one was particularly nauseating. I thought I had it traced, but then I heard something unsettling that threw me off track. Initially, I couldn't identify the noise, but soon realized it was a growl. Something was nearby, and it wasn't pleased. Slowly, I began retreating and avoiding sudden movements so as not to provoke it further. I wasn't sure what it was, but I didn't want to risk a confrontation by attempting to outrun it. Just as I was nearing my truck, I caught sight of the mysterious creature. It had been trailing me, unbeknownst to me. The way it moved through the woods without making a sound was more terrifying than actually laying eyes on it. This creature was straight out of a nightmare. Standing upright at a staggering 7 feet tall, it was covered in disgusting slimy fur. The stench emanating from it was gut-wrenching, but what truly unsettled me was its visage. With a lengthy snout and teeth reminiscent of a horror movie, all under the dim light, it resembled a grotesque hybrid of a man and a wolf. As soon as it noticed me observing it, it dropped to all fours, appearing even more menacing. I knew a single leap and it would be upon me. We locked eyes. I reached for my gun, maintaining my gaze on this eerie creature. We engaged in a tense standoff, but I managed to keep my composure, not even flinching. Just as swiftly as it had appeared, it darted into the underbrush. I didn't encounter it again after that. It seemed as though the creature recognized that the presence of the gun leveled the playing field, hence it didn't pursue me. Strange, I know. How could an animal discern that? This creature was far too intelligent. Afterward, I stood frozen, gazing at the spot where it had vanished. I was at a loss for words. That night, as I sat in my cabin, the woods took on an eerie vibe. Every rustle of leaves or random animal noise had me on edge, wondering if more of those bizarre creatures lurked nearby. You might think I've lost my mind or that it was merely poor lighting playing tricks on me. But no, I know what I saw. Things got weird for a while, and I kept revisiting the same spot, hoping to find more traces of that creature. I suppose now I've come to terms with the fact that it's out there somewhere. I don't dwell on it much anymore. I had just started my job as a cop, still feeling pretty green, and sometimes I wonder if I jumped into this gig too quickly. My partner Greg and I never really talked about this crazy incident, so we kept it to ourselves because we figured nobody would believe us. At the time, we weren't big shots in the force. Plus, Greg only had me as backup, and would anyone buy our wild story? Probably not. If anything, my presence would just make people more skeptical, but it's not like we tried to hide it. We kept quiet about what happened because we were both like, did that really just happen? We haven't talked about it since, but here's what happened. It was Halloween night. Cops usually dread Halloween because of all the chaos and drinking. Plus, the department thinks people tend to imagine things and scare themselves silly on Halloween. We got called out to several incidents that night. First, some kids were setting trash cans on fire, and then there were a couple of fights at bars. Finally, we got a call about some strange guy in a light suit lurking around Main Street. He wasn't doing anything silly, but he was too close to a neighborhood with kids. He seemed a bit odd, definitely out of place, especially in the darkness. This spot was kind of hidden away near a residential area, but really messy. It reminded me of a secret hangout spot back home, so I figured we were probably dealing with some drunk kid in a costume or maybe a homeless person wandering around. At first, it didn't seem too strange. We came across this concrete bridge over a stream, and there he was, the guy in the light outfit just chilling at the top. I guess he was the one everyone had been talking about. I couldn't see his face clearly from where I was standing, but I could tell he was a guy. He was wearing a pale jumpsuit and had something on his head. I couldn't quite make out what it was, a hat, a mask, or a hood. Your guess is as good as mine. We didn't want the guy to run off, so we parked the car and headed for the bridge. As we got closer, I felt really tense. The guy up there looked like a shadow, but our car lights weren't doing much, and oddly enough, even my flashlight wouldn't work. Greg's flashlight wouldn't turn on either. So he yelled out, "Hey there!" We thought this guy might be wasted and start rambling, but he didn't say a word. We were almost at the end of the tunnel, and this guy hadn't made a sound. Encountering something like this can be unsettling because you don't know what kind of situation you're walking into. Did the person need help, or were they just unable to speak? We had to be prepared for anything because we didn't know what we were dealing with. "Hey, what are you doing out here?" Greg asked. "Are you from around here?" I squinted at the figure. I couldn't see what he was wearing clearly, but it looked old and dirty. "Hey, if you're not going to talk, we're coming up there." Greg and I exchanged a glance. He nodded, indicating that we needed to approach the guy. So he went left and I went right. We had to climb up a hill on both sides to corner the guy on the bridge. The ground was a bit slippery from the humidity and fog, but by the time we reached the top, my partner and I could see each other from opposite ends of the bridge. But the guy was gone. He wasn't on the bridge anymore, just vanished. We went to where he was standing and looked for any sign that he had been there. Where did he go? There was no way he could have jumped from such a high bridge. We didn't hear a splash or a scream or anything. Now Greg was on the other side using his flashlight, looking just as confused as me. I could see his breath in the chilly air. We met up on the bridge and peered down into the water, but there's no sign of anyone. "This isn't right," Greg muttered. "This is strange." "Tell me about it," I replied, feeling a shiver all over my body. Maybe he found another way down, or is there a path we missed? We searched again but found nothing. No path, no signs of anyone. The fog started to roll in and making everything feel extremely spooky. We decided to head back to the car. What else could we do? We had to report it, but what could we even say? The guy just disappeared, right? As we hiked down that hill, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching us. I kept looking back, but I saw nothing, just fog and shadows and that damp night smell. Once we got in the car, even Greg was quiet. He was clearly shaken, and honestly, so was I, but I wouldn't admit it. We'd been through some strange situations together, but this was something else. We couldn't brush it off with a joke like usual, and the ride back to the station was silent, both of us lost in our thoughts. We gave our report, but our sergeant was as clueless as we were, so he told us to get some rest. But that night, neither Greg nor I could stop thinking about it. We kept replaying it in our minds, but nothing made sense. A few days later, we got another call. Same bridge, same guy. But when we got there, he had vanished again, and we still have no idea what was going on at that bridge. We still avoid that place like the plague, and yes, I know it sounds crazy, but I swear something strange was happening there. Greg agrees. We tell this story to the new recruits now like it's some sort of initiation. They're not sure if they believe it, but it's the truth. That Halloween night on the bridge really spooked us. We saw something really strange that has haunted us since, so I guess that's just the job, though. You never know what you'll come across. During my 10 years as a park ranger in the Channel Islands, I have encountered my fair share of unusual situations. Most of them involve peculiar individuals or uncommon animal sightings, which typically have some explanation. However, there was one incident that stood out as particularly perplexing. My duty is to watch over the park and all its inhabitants, human and animal alike. It was a typical day patrolling the Channel Islands, with the sun shining brightly and the backdrop of nature presenting its usual beauty. I've established a routine over the years, checking animal trails, monitoring our cameras, and simply enjoying the park's serene atmosphere. On this particular day, the weather was pleasant, the seagulls were squawking loudly, and the air carried the familiar scent of salt from the nearby sea. As I ventured into the more remote areas of the park, the sea appeared unusually calm. While relaxing by the Pacific Ocean, admiring the tranquility before the inevitable hustle and bustle, I found myself contemplating the stark contrast between nature and the distant container ships. The woods were serene, with only a few deer grazing and the occasional squirrel darting about. As I neared the end of my patrol, preparing to head home, things suddenly took an unexpected turn. Without warning, I felt a chilling gust all over my body despite the sunny weather. Even the birds fell silent, an occurrence that, though seemingly dramatic, I've learned to heed after spending so much time in the wilderness. Our bodies have a way of communicating with us that predates language, a primal instinct that we often overlook in our modern world. A sense of unease settled over me as I scanned my surroundings, noticing peculiar ripples in the water that seemed out of place. Drawing closer to the shore, I observed a shadowy figure beneath the surface. It was unlike any marine creature I had encountered before, its sheer size and unusual movements setting it apart from the park's usual inhabitants. Before I could fully comprehend what I was witnessing, the creature vanished into the depths, leaving me bewildered. Little did I know the strangeness was far from over. Suddenly, a thunderous roar shattered the silence, emanating from the sea with an otherworldly intensity. Despite the growing apprehension, I felt compelled to investigate further. In an instant, the calm sea transformed into a tempestuous maelstrom, roiling and churning as if possessed by rage. Then, emerging from the chaos, appeared a colossal serpent-like creature, its scales gleaming in the sunlight as it hovered above the waves with uncanny grace. Its eyes bore a sinister intelligence, unlike anything I had ever encountered in the natural world. The air was thick with a foul stench that nearly overwhelmed me, a potent reminder of the creature's primal presence. With a powerful surge, it plunged back into the turbulent waters, leaving behind a wake of tumultuous waves. As I reflected on this extraordinary encounter in the days that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling of having glimpsed a hidden realm within the park, a realm where ancient mysteries still lingered, waiting to be discovered. It's moments like these that remind me of the vastness of the wilderness and the endless wonders it holds just beyond the reach of our understanding. Several years back, during my tenure as a park ranger in Alaska, peculiar occurrences were a dime a dozen. Shadows danced strangely, and eerie noises echoed through the night. It was as if I inhabited a realm altogether alien from the usual. One summer evening, the ordinary routine took a dramatic turn. The day commenced as any other: routine patrols, standard check-ins, ensuring adherence to regulations, and observing the tranquility of the wildlife. Yet, as dusk descended, things veered off course. While traversing a trail adjacent to the woods, a growl pierced the air, unlike the typical hoot of an owl. It emanated with a deep, wounded tone, instilling an unsettling sensation within me. Suspecting an injured animal or perhaps a bear too close for comfort, I readied my tranquilizer gun. Following the sound led me off the beaten path and deeper into the foliage. No matter the years of experience, navigating the Alaskan wilderness in pursuit of a bear remains a daunting endeavor. The growls intensified as I drew near. Strangely, they morphed, evolving from animalistic growls into sounds akin to human groans. Amidst the noise, whispers intermingled, distinctly human whispers. Recollecting the experience gives me a strange sensation. Nevertheless, I pressed on, the whispers amplifying like the rustle of wind through leaves. Their meaning eluded me, resembling the fragmented dialogue of a dream. Despite every instinct urging retreat, I persisted, driven by an inexplicable force. Eventually, I stumbled upon a clearing, besieged by inexplicable noises. Panicked, I brandished my flashlight, but the shadows conspired against visibility. At the clearing's edge, my beam illuminated a towering, quasi-humanoid figure, unmistakably otherworldly in its appearance. It bore traits both human and bestial, a grotesque amalgamation of the two. Fear gripped me tightly, yet duty demanded composure. Thus I steadied myself, aiming my tranquilizer gun at the aberration. The air carried a putrid stench, a cocktail of damp earth, animal musk, and an indescribable foulness. To my disbelief, the creature spoke. Its voice, a cacophony akin to a wild creature's attempt at human speech, yet far harsher. A semblance of language emerged, reminiscent of Inuit dialects. It possessed an eerie sentience, transcending mere animalistic utterances. Stunned, I stood frozen, grappling with the surreal encounter. Then, as if to exacerbate the horror, the creature shed its skin, transforming into a nightmare made flesh. Towering at 6 feet, its emaciated form appeared stretched taut, its eyes ablaze with an otherworldly glow. They burned like smoldering coals, radiating an eerie luminescence. The bald figure shimmered under the light, its transformation a grotesque spectacle. It uttered cryptic phrases in its alien tongue. "Leave," it commanded, a menacing ultimatum. Panic surged through me, adrenaline coursing as I brandished my weapon erratically, but the encounter proved brief. The creature allowed my escape, a silent specter lurking in the darkness. Retreating to the safety of my ranger station, I barricaded myself within, haunted by the echoes of that unearthly voice. The night stretched endlessly, every sound a harbinger of unseen terrors. Since that fateful encounter, the wilderness ceased to be a sanctuary, forever tainted by the memory. I cannot pinpoint the exact date because it all hit me like a bolt from the blue, but here's what I can recall. It was late autumn, and I found myself dwelling near an ancient factory at that time. During my childhood, I often heard tales about that place, ghost stories, fabricated monster anecdotes, you name it. Then life took me elsewhere into the city hustle, but a certain longing for my roots drew me back. By then, my childhood home had been sold long ago. In my affordable range, there stood a modest house close to the old factory. I could spy it from my windows, and truth be told, it put me on edge. Not for any concrete reason aside from the lingering memories of those half-forgotten ghostly tales from my youth. Yet an uneasy aura surrounded it. It felt as if something lurked within, something that didn't belong. That sensation never left me during my stay there, and whatever inhabited or haunted that abandoned factory seemed uninterested in bothering me. As long as it remained quiet and undisturbed, I reasoned, I could carry on with life as usual. Besides my work routine, I tended to stick close to home. I dabbled in amateur carpentry, setting up a workspace in my living room and dedicating much of my free time to it. Even from there, I had a clear view of the factory through the window. It was odd, to say the least, and that peculiarity persisted. Shadows flitted about the old structure, suggesting a presence within, perhaps just wildlife seeking refuge, I hoped. Our area teemed with critters that would gladly call the factory home, but still, that eerie sense of foreboding lingered. Weeks went by in this manner. I considered myself somewhat of a skeptic, and I didn't buy into ghost stories or mythical creatures. The nighttime shadows dancing around the factory were likely nothing more than raccoons or possums seeking shelter. At least that's what I tried to convince myself. One evening, while engrossed in a frustrating carpentry project, I found my gaze drawn to the empty factory. There was definitely something stirring within, but what? Almost mechanically, I observed as the shadows shifted once more, revealing a figure. It was unmistakably humanoid, though larger and emaciated. Its visage was skeletal, its form grotesquely thin, as if starvation had hollowed it out. My heart pounded in my chest, the sound almost deafening in the stillness. I couldn't discern its nature. Was it afflicted, or was this its natural state? It moved with a predator's grace, devoid of any clothing that I could discern. Yet it wasn't the emaciation that chilled me to the bone. It was the absence of a face, replaced by gaping abyssal voids where eyes should have been. I watched transfixed as the creature, its pallid skin almost luminous in the dim light of passing headlights, emitted eerie clicking noises that reverberated through the silent night. I felt as though I had stumbled into a scene from a horror film, longing for the banality of ordinary nights. Days became a struggle, each moment fraught with tension as if time itself had ground to a halt. Summoning whatever courage I could muster, I reached for my phone, intent on seeking help. But who? What authority deals with nocturnal monstrosities? The city? State patrol? Wildlife officers? Uncertain of the creature's origin, I settled on dialing the police, my voice betraying my fear as I recounted the sighting to the operator. Relief washed over me when help finally arrived, yet the shadows in the factory remained still, lifeless. Despite their professionalism, the officers couldn't conceal their skepticism, attributing the disturbance to mischievous teens or perhaps a simple case of mistaken identity with a wild animal. That night, sleep evaded me. Every creak, every rustle outside my window wove itself into a tapestry of terror unfolding around me. The dread weighed heavy on my mind. Believe it or not, I remain here, but the days feel different now. The factory stands silent, yet I feel no sense of security. My search for alternative housing hasn't yielded results as promising as I'd hoped. As I pen these words, I'm still nestled beside the factory, uncomfortably close to the creature lurking within. I attempt to carry on with my daily routines, yet the fear of encountering it again looms large. What if it ventures beyond the factory's confines? What if it comes for me? I'm certain it knows of my presence, just as I am acutely aware of its dwelling place within that desolate structure. A few years back, I took a trip to Valisa, Iowa to check out the famous Valisa axe murder house. In 1912, 8 people, including 6 children, were killed there. The mystery of who did it remains unsolved, leading to various speculations. Normally, I'm not into paranormal stuff, but since I was visiting family nearby, and the chance to see this historical place was too good to pass up, the journey promised to be memorable at the very least. We arrived in Valisa around noon, and the town had an eerie vibe. The axe murder house lived up to its reputation, looking like your stereotypical haunted house. Simple, yet unsettling, it triggered an uneasy feeling. On the day of my visit, the house had peeling white paint, and its windows exuded a spooky aura. Perhaps it was the knowledge of the grim events that unfolded within its walls, but it seemed scarier than your average haunted house. Accompanied by a group of tourists, we entered cautiously, a mix of fear and excitement evident in our expressions. Inside, the atmosphere was dim, close, and cold, with a peculiar scent of old dust and polished wood lingering. Each room we explored had its unique, unsettling vibe. The tour guide narrated the tragic events that occurred in different parts of the house, contributing to the uncomfortably quiet ambiance, broken only by the guide's soft storytelling and the hushed sounds of our footsteps. Yet something felt off for me beyond the expected eerie atmosphere. It wasn't just the chilling history, there was an unshakable feeling of unease. Trying to dismiss my unease as a product of the morbid history, I pressed on, moving through the house, starting with the ground floor rooms and then progressing upstairs. Each room heightened my unease, as if traversing through a thick fog. The cold and eerie feeling intensified with every step. You know that sensation of not being alone, the feeling of being observed even when there's no one in sight? Despite trying to reassure myself, the unsettling feeling persisted. We wandered through dark, narrow hallways and explored upstairs bedrooms. The atmosphere resembled scenes from a horror movie, with the guide's creepy tales punctuating the silence. However, things took a turn when we entered the main bedroom. Upon stepping into the main bedroom, an abrupt coldness enveloped me. It started subtly, like a cold breeze raising the hair on the back of my neck. Yet it wasn't merely a breeze. It felt as though someone lightly touched my shoulder. For a moment I held my breath, thinking it might be a fellow tourist playing a prank. However, turning around revealed no one behind me, just the dimly lit room with its old-fashioned decor. A dim light bulb hung above, and beneath its light I perceived something resembling fog, not entirely white, more like undulating lines seen on a hot day. At that point, every fiber of my being screamed to escape, to never look back. Yet I stood there, frozen and terrified, feeling an unsettling sickness in my stomach. After what felt like an eternity, I managed to step back and retreat from the room, leaving whatever inexplicable presence I felt behind. Rejoining the group downstairs, I kept my experience to myself. How could I explain a phantom touch on my shoulder when there was no one around? Stepping out, the air felt refreshingly cool, and for the rest of the day I couldn't shake off a sense of relief, as if narrowly avoiding something significant. If it was a ghost, it chose not to accompany us. Subsequent to that peculiar encounter, I didn't experience anything unsettling. No cold spots, no ghostly touches. It seemed whatever presence existed confined itself to that specific room. Later, I learned that one of the deceased adults, the mother, used to occupy the main bedroom. Could it have been her ghost touching my shoulder?